Szeretettel köszöntelek titeket a Kontextus ezen extra adásában, ahol nem mással, mint John Mclaughlinnal fogunk beszélgetni, aki a Trump-kampány egyik fő pollstere, és Trumpnak személyesen ez egyik főtanácsadója. Welcome to our studio.
Pleasure to be here.
In Transylvania, in Tusványoson, in a festival. So I was trying to find something to start with, and it's really hard because we have a very turbulent days. So I was just eager to find out, like, what is the bigger threat to the United States, like the assassination attempt or the nomination of Kamala Harris?
Well, fortunately, thanks to God, we still have a candidate in Donald Trump. So he was able to, he spoke about at the convention, he was able to just turn his head, and fortunately, the assassin's bullet just grazed his ear, and it could have been a lot worse. And he's quite a strong, he's an amazing person, strong man, but he's moving forward with the campaign. And right now, the election of Kamala Harris will be a lot worse. And her policies that she supports, that her and Joe Biden, that they've overseen the last 4 years, most Americans will tell you they're not better off today than they were 4 years ago. And she is fully signed on to Joe Biden's agenda, whether it was her being the border czar, where it was totally open border, millions of illegals coming into the country, causing crime, bringing in dangerous drugs, killing hundreds of thousands of Americans with fentanyl. You have also violent criminals coming into the country. She oversaw that, and she's responsible for that. She's also responsible for she was cast a tie-breaking vote in the U.S. Senate for Joe Biden's spending that caused this inflation. So she's a full partner in Biden's radical left-wing policies that have really taken America down, that have made America a lot weaker, and made Americans a lot more vulnerable in their daily lives, not just in terms of economically, but also in terms of personal safety.
That's the topic I wanted to talk about first, and you already mentioned a few. Like, from what we see from Hungary is that the United States is really polarized. Is that true?
It's polarized, but I think a majority is coming together where you're going to see a new majority coalition of working men and women who are the majority of Americans supporting Donald Trump for president, because we can't have another 4 years like the last 4 years. I mean, it's just the idea that the average worker in the United States under President Trump, their wages adjusted for inflation went up $4,200 during that time. Adjusted for inflation under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's declined $2,100. So you've seen a decline in the standard of living, a decline in people's wealth. People saying in our last national survey, 84% said they've been negatively impacted by inflation, 49% to the point that they have trouble affording basic necessities. And also, the majority of Americans are worried about the security. Crime is up. Kamala Harris, she wanted to defund the police, well known on record. She also set up a bail fund to release violent criminals who have since murdered and raped and killed innocent Americans. And, she definitely, as a commander-in-chief, would be really bad. But Americans know this, and that's why I think Donald Trump will be able to put together a majority coalition. In fact, the one poll out yesterday, Rasmussen reports, had Trump at 50% and Harris at 43%. So we're on the edge of getting this majority right now.
So Trump will be able to unite?
Well, he's been what I call grinding up in the polls, where we've always had a plurality lead over Biden, but we also on the edge of creating a majority lead. And when the clear issue differences come between Trump and Harris, we should be able to get that majority lead. Because initially the press is trying to forget that she was the most radical senator, forget that she was this border czar under Joe Biden, forget that she supported all his failed policies. They're trying to recreate a new candidate from the old Kamala Harris that most voters know and don't like. And when they come to know her better, when she's more of a focus, she's less popular. So if we grind those numbers up, where we're going up, we should be able to create a majority.
So the key topics of this election will be inflation, security.
Inflation, the border. When we took a poll right before the now historic Trump-Biden debate that President Trump did very well in, we asked questions, what did they want CNN to ask about? What did they want the moderators to ask about, first or second choice? And 49% said inflation, 31% said border security, 21% said economy and jobs. You had 16% talk about Social Security and Medicare, which are old age health care and pensions. 15% talked about January 6th and defending democracy. And only 12% said abortion. So the most important issues are still inflation, are still the border, still the economy and jobs, still their concerns for the future. And President Trump has the better policies, the better ideas, and the majority of voters support him on that.
That's what I wanted to ask next. So what policy Kamala Harris pushes, and what's the difference between, for example, regarding the inflation, what Trump says and what Kamala Harris says?
On inflation, well, first of all, when President Trump he points to his record. He had a strong dollar, and inflation was running at less than 2%. Price of gas was, gasoline for automobiles was half the price in the United States. So his policies, he points to what people paid for food. It's like half of what you're paying now, 4 years ago. What it costs to rent, to buy a car, to take a mortgage. Interest rates on mortgage payments were half. He points to those records that his sound policies, his sound economic policies, protected workers' wages from the evil tax of inflation. And he had pro-growth tax cuts, where when he reduced the corporate tax to 21%, he reduced personal income taxes, you saw economic growth in the United States. You saw jobs created, millions of jobs created, and at low inflation. And that's a big contrast to what Biden has going right now, because they're spending so much money that we don't need to spend. Their budget is so out of whack. The deficit is getting bigger. The national debt's getting bigger. Pretty soon we're going to pay more in national debt than we do on Social Security and Medicare, of government programs. So we've got to get that debt under control, and the only way you get under control is by growing the economy and reducing inflation.
And but Harris, as you mentioned in your speech just before the interview, so Harris was one who pushed this inflation package before.
She cast the deciding vote. As the vice president, you don't have a vote in the Senate unless there's a tie, unless they need you. And when Biden was pushing his spending program for $1.9 trillion, she had to cast that vote. And most of it was like they were literally sending out monthly checks to people. They were giving people like checks that didn't need it. It wasn't means tested, wasn't whether people need it or not. It was just basically spending money. And then they had a lot of money that they were sending to state and local governments who were also continuing high spending programs that needed to rein it in and become more rational in their spending. And they just pumped that money blew it into the economy, and it just triggered inflation. And everybody's own wages were worth less because the dollar was worth less and inflation was going up.
And did you measure, or Kamala was measured during the terms of Biden when he was still, and her numbers changed to which direction?
Our numbers haven't changed significantly at all. We'll wait and see, because you can't, since Sunday, the American media, the left-wing media, whether it's CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, all the TV networks, they've been talking about what a great vice president she is and how great this is. So they may change the numbers a little, but on our website at McLaughlinOnline.com, we put up a monthly national poll where we chart. We charted the presidential campaign, Trump versus Biden. We also charted Harris versus Biden because of Biden's age. We never knew when she might be the sitting president. And Donald Trump, by the way, over the last several times over the past year, he said to me, I don't think Biden's going to last. I don't think I'm going to be running against him. So this is what he thought, and he was prepared for it. And she's fully responsible for the Biden-Harris agenda.
Yeah.
And, her numbers may go up in a little bit, but those numbers I was telling you about, we posted right before the June 26th debate, or that debate, June 27th debate. On June 26th, we posted a national survey. Trump was leading Biden by 2, which is an electoral landslide for us. But he was leading Harris by 5.
Wow.
So if she goes up to Biden's level, she's still behind us. And, most Americans don't like her. She had a 40 favorable rating and a 54 unfavorable rating.
Was that then a tactical resignation of Biden or forced by the Democrats? Because if he was higher in numbers than Kamala, then why did he?
Very good question. It was really a coup, because he was overthrown by the liberal media and his own Democrat Party bosses, and he didn't want to leave. He's staying as president. He didn't want to step down. He thinks he could beat Donald Trump. And he was resolute in that. But the media pressure from his own people kept it up. Because when you think about it, he won the primaries and caucuses in 50 states for the Democrat Party. He's their nominee. And they just basically forced him to resign because he was losing to Donald Trump. They don't care about his health. They're all saying it's about his health. He's too old. Well, where have they been the last 3.5 years? He was too old when he wouldn't come out of his basement in 2020. But as long as he was ahead in the polls, they were fine with it. Once he was losing to Donald Trump, then, we got to get rid of him. And with Kamala Harris, it's not done yet till they actually vote for her and put her on the ticket. But if she keeps losing to Trump, like she probably will, I don't know what they're going to do. It's like, we're just going to campaign really hard between now and the election, make sure Donald Trump wins. So,
regarding the campaign, as far as I know, the laws in the states does not let from one candidate to transfer the money to the other one. Is that true? And also I've read that there was a record-breaking donation to Kamala just in one day, which is a little bit.
Well, you have.
strange.
I mean, the Democrat Party has a lot of donors, but they're able, because it's her, they're able to move whatever's in the Biden-Harris campaign
because
account
it was both of them.
to her.
Both of them.
Yes.
Okay.
And on the second point, her raising $80 million, the Democrats have refused to change the election laws in the United States so that donations under $200 that are done online, we have no idea who they're coming from. They don't add them up. The Federal Elections Commission doesn't add them up to see if somebody's breaking the law. So if you have, and there's a limit, like an individual can give $3,300 in American money. And they also have to report, like, if you give over $200, you have to say your name, your address, and your employer. And there's been some fishy things that have gone on the internet where all of a sudden people get a lot of these donations and they're under the 200. You have no idea where they're coming from. It could be a bot. And they've seen it where they've seen people saying that I never authorized that and it was taken out of my bank account or my credit card. So she's raised that money, but who knows if it was a legitimate legal source or if it's somebody abusing the internet to make anonymous donations.
Yeah. But will that matter? We're just 100 days before the election, so...
You want the election to be free and fair. You want the election to be honest. And will it matter? Hopefully it won't matter, but as far as we're concerned, we want the election to go ahead as honestly as possible. And we're hoping that we're able to win that election. So with our hard work. But if we ever let our guard down, would they cheat? Yeah, they would cheat.
Yeah. Are you sure they will cheat?
Are you sure?
Well,
I had a friend Pat Caddell, who was Jimmy Carter's pollster, who later on in life helped President Trump with us. He had a saying that the Democrats are the crooked party and the Republicans are the stupid party. So if the Republicans don't get smarter than they were 4 years ago, yes, Democrats will cheat. And once the ballots are in there, if they do ballot harvesting, when they had the drop box, it's been well documented now. You had drop boxes and ballot harvesting going on in Georgia. You had it going on in Wisconsin. You had ballots come in well after Election Day in Pennsylvania, which are no longer allowed anymore. If you let them cheat, they will. But once the ballots are in the box, you can't get them out. You don't know you don't know if they're the good balance or the bad balance. So we have to make sure it's an honest election going in, and that's what the Republican National Committee is dedicated to, and that's what the Trump campaign is dedicated to, and we're just going to not let our guard down.
Mm. How can you make sure that, or how can you lower the number of, cheatings and all this?
By vigilance. By basically, literally, you have to put poll workers on the ground to make sure that everybody coming into a poll is a legitimate voter, and they're only voting for themselves and just once. And so if you have, Donald Trump motivates millions of people. I would say literally millions of people go to his rallies, they go to his events, they watch him on the internet, they follow him on the internet, they watch him on TV, etc. If we motivate those people, we'll have hundreds of thousands of poll workers who can monitor early in-person voting, who can monitor election day voting, and who can check absentees. So you have to do that.
But as you retweeted it, as I saw that, it will be like a Super Bowl, like between Patriots and Steelers.
Right.
Okay, so let's go ahead in the election. So maybe our prayers will listen, and Trump will win the election.
Very hard.
Yeah, we definitely do. But will he be able to drain that swamp? But first of all, for all the Hungarians who are with us now, what is that swamp?
A swamp is, you have people who have different views about the world and about the United States. And they're the governing elite, the unelected state that stays there regardless of who the president is. And Donald Trump was a shock to their system in 2016 because he wasn't a traditional politician. He also came in with an agenda that wasn't their agenda, that basically he was going to fight for the working men and women of America. He was going to fight for the working middle class. And he really didn't care what the government, was doing other than they should be there to work for us.
Yeah.
So with that business attitude that he took to Washington the first time, I think a lot of the people that are in the elites, that they know better. That in effect that, they're better off taking money from you and spending it than leaving it with you for you to spend it. They're better off telling your sons and daughters where they need to go to fight and risk their lives rather than, be on a mission to defend America. They're the ones who tell us that letting violent criminals out of jail is good for us somehow. And, they're fed by the Soros nonprofits, the left of center nonprofits that exist because a lot of the Davos-type elites, they want to control our society, vote for us, and our opinions don't matter to them. So I think Donald Trump, when he gets back into office, he's going to make the federal government a lot more accountable to the people that pay the taxes and pay the bills and need their help rather than people who seem to be exploiting the system.
As far as I can see now, it's pretty much the same like we have in the EU, in Brussels. But it's really hard to drain that swamp. What is the American receipt for that?
Oh, by the way, Donald Trump's been very specific about the policies he's putting out. So you could go to his website and you go to his True Social. They've got policies and they have legal ideas, particularly in his think tank, America First Policy Institute, exactly what they're going to do to rein in the bureaucracy and make them accountable again. So, and the deep state knows it, and they're going to fight our election, but that's what the election's about. So.
There was a research of the Századvég about Europe, about the European people, what they think about the war, all the economical issues, inflation. And what we saw is that the elite and the people are heading into different directions.
Yes.
And this is what I can see there as well. How do you see, how can it be? How can it be possible? Like the elites are there, how could they get there? And how can it be that the people are just simply not able to replace them?
It's because they don't have the same values. So in America, the vast majority of voters believe in hard work. They believe in You know, they have some religious faith, probably a traditional religious faith. They have a certain feeling about the family. They have a feeling about their children's education. They have a feeling that parents should be in control of that. They have a feeling that the United States should be strong and secure at peace. And they have a set of values that, when you compare it to the elites, it's very different. So that in terms of how they tax and spend money, how they exercise the use of power in a society, they even have a fundamental, in the United States, in our Bill of Rights, the First Amendment guarantees the right to free speech. These elites in America don't think we have a right to free speech. In 2020, they worked together with Twitter and Zuckerberg and Facebook to basically censor news stories and censor free speech during the election, where when the story came out about Hunter Biden's laptop and the payoffs he was getting from foreign governments, that was published on the New York Post. The New York Post, which was one of our founders, Alexander Hamilton from the Revolutionary, wartime's a Federalist, founder of the Constitution, big believer in free speech. They censored that paper story. They took it off the internet. And 51 American elite intelligence experts, foreign policy experts, signed a letter saying it was Russian disinformation when they knew that was a lie. So they lied to censor people and take away our rights to enable Joe Biden to win the election. And what was really tough about that was we did a post-election survey immediately. And when we asked people if they were aware of it, only 2/3 of the Biden voters were aware. 1/3 was not aware of the Hunter Biden laptop story and the corruption story. And if they were aware, that 1/3 told us they wouldn't have voted for Biden. They would have voted for, most of them would have voted for someone else, and some of them would have voted for Trump. Biden would not have won the election if that story had gotten full coverage. But that's a big example of how the elites view the election, and how they would use it to steal the election from us, and how they would use it to basically control and have power over middle-class Americans, which is just an absolute crime.
But the majority of the Americans don't see that, like how the media lies to them. How
they see now, the American media has lost a lot of credibility. I mean, they've lost amazing. That's why podcasts like yours, the Foundation, that's why your podcasts flourish, because people are looking for the truth. And the American media has done really bad damage to themselves. And it's almost like, if MSNBC, CNN says one thing, and we've done studies of this, basically, okay, there's a small group, 30% of the voters that go along with it, and there's 35% that listen to Fox News and Newsmax and goes a different way. And then there's 30% in the middle that are looking for the truth. And they go to their friends, their family, they go to the internet, they look for things about, like this kind of a podcast to find out what the truth is. So the media has really done, their ratings are way down. They've done real damage to themselves. And it's hopefully as a society we can recover, but you have to restore the basic honesty, the fundamental integrity of journalism and media coverage in the United States as well as in the world again.
But can they do more damage? I mean, from our viewpoint, the assassination attempt was maybe incited by the media, or was it? Or maybe what we saw back then in 2020, how the media covered the siege of the Capitolium.
Right.
If the elections will not go into their favor, will they incite maybe a civil war, or is there, I don't know how to put it that way. So is there a mood for a civil war in America?
Hopefully, no. I think, by the way, the fact that after our leader of our movement, the leading candidate for president, after he was nearly assassinated and survived with merely a graze on his ear, but he was there. Everybody saw the picture with the blood on his ear, him being covered up by the Secret Service agents, him being taken away, him saying, "Fight, fight, fight." everybody saw that. But there were no riots in America. There was no looting. There was no burning. There was no violence that came out of that. And that's a testament to the great people that support the Make America Great movement. Because we're channeling, the majority of Americans are angry. And we're channeling that anger and that fear and worry into the ballot box. And we're going to go vote. And there is a lot of really anger at, this should have never happened. And, I mean, you know, you wait for the facts to come out, but our people are in positions like we back in 2022 during the election. I was working in Israel. I was working in the United States. Viktor Orbán just had a great victory, so I got to go see the Prime Minister, and it was Labor Day weekend, and he told us that we need to make sure his advisors and ourselves. After his re-election, what the world needed was, he wanted to see Meloni elected in Italy. Yeah. She was. He wanted to see Bibi Netanyahu elected in Israel, which we were helping him, and he was. And he wanted to have the Republicans take over Congress. And ironically, we did. And our firm, we took over the one house, and our polling firm was involved, my brother Jim and I, in making sure that we knocked off 5 sitting Democrats. So we'd have a 4-seat majority. So we did that, but because we have the House, we're able to get information and subpoenas and block, first of all, the January 6th committee, railroad, kangaroo court, undemocratic, all the accusations of Trump being undemocratic, by people who now have thrown out their nominee, disregarded 14 million primary votes in a coup, because he was losing in the polls to Trump. And that's really dangerous. That's bad for democracy. And they're being exposed by it. And we're the ones playing by the rules. We're the ones who are ensuring that it's an honest, fair election. And we're the ones who got to be vigilant that they don't do what they did before. Because basically, when you talk about stealing an election, when they censored the Hunter Biden laptop story, and when they testified that it was Russian disinformation, they were the ones undermining democracy, and that's what that January 6th committee did, because no Trump supporters were allowed on it. So there was no fair and balanced. It wasn't even like Watergate in the United States. Watergate back when I was much younger. We would watch it every day, and there was Republicans and Democrats asking questions, getting to the truth. We never got the truth from January 6th, and that's something that if we win this election and we have the House and we have the Senate, we should find out what's going on. Because we owe it to protect our freedoms and our rights and our democracy in America. So it's like...
Also, just one more question about the Civil War, because what we see from here is that, there was a Civil War in the United States, but that happened after an election. Is there a possibility that they will try to kill Trump after the election to incite this kind of...
Who knows? War? I mean, the Americans, we don't want a Civil War. I think I love history. I love to... What I do right now is you feel like you're a witness to history. The mood that existed in the United States in 1860, very different than right now. Most Americans want to come... What was interesting was President Trump, after being shot at, most Americans want to come and unify. And we had a very unifying convention where the parties definitely united. You saw a lot of positive messages going out from there. And... the Democrats are unifying behind Kamala Harris, but it's going to be a peaceful election, and there will be a winner, and the majority of Americans will go on with that winner. Hopefully, it's us, but we've got a lot of work to do between now and then. But you don't see the historic climate, where there was, the institution of slavery in the United States was dividing Americans back then. Yeah, and you had major economic forces. Where regions of the country were growing apart instead of together. And right now, if anything, we're all connected. The world is more tightly connected than the United States is connected, but the world is even more tightly connected. And granted, while we may diverge, America will still be one country. And I think what's going to keep them together is we've got serious enemies in the world. And if they're not enemies, some adversaries. But you've got some dangerous enemies and you've got some dangerous adversaries that most Americans will unite and rally around to make sure that we stay strong and we don't have to worry about any kind of, we really want peace. We really do not want to be involved in wars overseas, and we certainly don't want one at home. So.
And that's my next question. Like, what the majority of Americans think about the war in Israel and in the Ukraine?
Well, in Israel, Hamas, they look like they're in the same ideology as the people that flew the planes into the 9/11 into the attack on America that day, and whether it was the World Trade Center or the Pentagon. It's the same radical ideology. So the vast majority of Americans see Hamas as a terrorist group. And the way Donald Trump handled ISIS, that's the way we like to deal with terrorist groups, especially when they're chanting death to Israel and death to America. We know if they're done with Israel, it's us. So we really don't like that. The other part, the war in Russia and Ukraine, the vast majority of Americans want peace talks and want this war to end peacefully rather than continuing to fund a war that they don't see any end in sight for it. And they see the stories. Now, granted, you're much closer over here than we are. But still, Americans are seeing this, and the idea of hundreds of thousands of people being hurt, besides our government giving money, Americans have put in billions of dollars humanitarian aid on their own voluntarily. I mean, Governor George Pataki, who happens to be Hungarian descent, he's running a nonprofit where he's raising money in America to give to refugees from Ukraine. And you have a lot of Ukrainian Americans where we just want that war to end and people to go back to living in peace. And I know Donald Trump, as soon as he gets in office, he'll fix it. And as far as the Gaza terrorists, they're holding Americans that Joe Biden hasn't got back. Not just Israelis, but Americans. And Israelis, I mean, any human being is being held hostage against their will. That's a crime against the whole world. But those terrorists are holding Americans. And they have they have the gall to demand that we send them billions of dollars in aid, humanitarian aid. Well, that's what they use for weapons and tunnels and, terrorists to attack Israel and attack our friends and allies and to take Americans. With Donald Trump, if they don't get he said it in the convention, if they don't get those hostages back to the United States safe and sound, he will deal with them, and they won't like that. There'll be a reckoning to pay, as he said. And if you don't like us, if you don't respect us, at least if you fear us and you see America as strong, we will be safer and we'll be at peace, and hopefully the world will be better for it.
So there's a difference between the Democrats again, because as when we can see, they're blocking all the support for Israel and all these. So
they're giving what they have to give, but they're not giving what they should give. And the worst part about it is it's their policy of weakness doesn't work. And that's what we've seen for the last 3.5 years. That if America looks weak, then we're in trouble. And our allies and friends are in trouble. Whether it's NATO, whether it's Israel, whether it's Taiwan. South Korea, if we look weak, bad things happen. And the sooner that Donald Trump gets elected and we win this election, and that may be, even though when you ask about a poll, inflation's the top issue and the border security, et cetera. Ultimately, the one thing that makes the president different than any other office is that president of the United States is the commander-in-chief, and you are supposed to keep America strong and at peace. And the best candidate to do that is Donald Trump. And Kamala Harris, her and Joe Biden, they've created a big problem for the world and a big problem for the United States.
Yeah.
And they're weak, and that probably is going to be the biggest defining difference between President Trump and Kamala Harris.
You mentioned Taiwan. How about China?
How about China? Donald Trump knows China very well. He's dealt with them successfully in the past, whether it's about trade or whether it's about, seeing us as a strong military that will protect our friends from any kind of aggression. I think, I think China respects Donald Trump more, and I think so. And I think they have a longer-term view than most Americans and most other countries have. But in that long-term view, I think they have a very different attitude about how we would act and cooperate together if Donald Trump was president, and so we'll see. But I think for now, the Chinese have really taken advantage of Joe Biden. They know he's corrupt. They paid for a lot of that corruption for his family and him. And our Secretary of State was the head of the Blinken Penn Center, where he's getting Anthony Blinken with the Biden Penn Center, where he's getting. They got over $100 million from China, Chinese companies, and Blinken was getting $1 million a year. So it's like, and you're trying to deal with them. It's just. It's the American media has not covered this to the extent they should have. They were too busy lying about the Hunter Biden laptop and misleading the American public, which is why they don't have the credibility they once did decades ago.
If still about foreign politics, what we Hungarians can expect for? Because as now you can see, the relationship between the two countries are not as good as it was back then.
Well. Yeah, it was really good under Donald Trump. It was very good, and what he respected was he supported your right to have a security fence, and we know that Soros and Brussels didn't think that was a good idea. Now you're seeing these other countries in Europe move right because they have problems with immigration and crime. Sounds familiar with the U.S. But Trump would support that, and Trump also supports Hungary as an important NATO ally. What was interesting is when they were talking about the 2% contributions, Hungary's there. Although when I was polling for Prime Minister Orbán and Donald Trump, I was reminding President Trump, is besides the defense spending, they also have a security fence, and he liked that because we're gonna have to spend a lot more money on a bigger fence for the United States, build a wall. But I think you'll have a good ally, and the great part is trade, and. One of the things that the United States does that affects the whole world in a positive sense, the one thing we did was, Trump was president, was we increased oil and gas production and reduced our carbon imprint and carbon emissions at the same time, but it lowered the price of gasoline and oil around the world. And he wanted to export more to Europe, setting up liquid natural gas pipelines, et cetera, like that. And if Donald Trump's president, we get to do that, it'll give Europe the freedom. You don't have to buy Russian oil. You don't have to buy Iranian oil. You could get oil and gas from America. You could use American technology to build more efficient green products and manufacture that way, and it creates jobs. And right now, the way they're going about it, where they're trying to mandate that people do things when the world is not ready to make the leap yet. Electric vehicles sounds good, but people don't buy them. They don't go as well. They don't work as well in the winter. It's the technology isn't quite there yet. So you have to use energy effectively and smart. And I think that would lower world inflation if Donald Trump's back there helping to lower the price of oil and gas around the world. It would help Hungary. So, and it would be a more stable world too.
Well, I have one more question here. That, as you can see, in Hungary, we're eager to get the answers for all our questions about the United States. But will the Americans be able to answer their own questions?
In this election?
As well as
hopefully.
Regarding the tensions within the country.
Yeah, hopefully. When was the last time you were in America?
Last August.
Last August?
Yeah.
So it's been a year. I think that the energy, the way it's channeling towards the election, if it's an honest and fair election, I think you'll see that Americans will be satisfied. We want Donald Trump to win in the worst way. We want him to win. But you saw it last time where there might have been some peaceful protests and there might have been the rioting at the Capitol that happened, but nobody died from that. There were some deaths after it, unrelated, but basically it was a protest. It wasn't a civil war. It wasn't an uprising. It wasn't what the other side tried to make. When we won in 2016, they had massive protests. You could go down to the inaugural and get spit on by some left-wingers, and they would rock your cars and they would chase you down in the streets. But still, it wasn't the kind of tragedy you might see in other countries. But I think when the election happens, most Americans will accept it. And as long as it's an honest, fair election. So I think we're going to work as hard as ever for the next 102 days to make sure that happens. And then we're going to work as hard as ever to make sure Donald Trump wins it.
John Mclaughlin, thank you for taking part in this.
Thank you very much.
Te meg ne felejtsetek el feliratkozni, és osszátok meg, hogy minél többekhez elérjen, hogy bizony Amerikában is van fény az alagút végén. Köszönjük, hogy velünk tartottatok, találkozunk jövő héten. Sziasztok!